Okay, we are 3 minutes past the hour. Hello and welcome everybody. My name is Ryan Coe. I'm the Chief of Staff at Code for America, and welcome to our virtual summit series event today. Rapid pandemic response, governments rising to help those who need it the most. And a big thanks to our sponsor, Oracle. Okay, so before we go ahead and jump in and introduce our panelists, and just a quick response, as I've seen this question come in a couple of times already, this session will be recorded, yes, and released on our YouTube channel. A couple of housekeeping notes. Just thank you everybody for being here. We're really excited for this conversation. Our Code for America Code of Conduct applies to all of our gatherings, and you can find it at the bit.ly here, bit.ly/CFA Code of Conduct. If you would like to, or if you'd like to report any violations or just contact with a question, feel free to chat the hosts, the panelists here, or feel free to contact safespace@codeforamerica.org, which is a confidential email box accessible by Code for America staff helping on this call. You will also see the Code of Conduct link dropped in the chat below. We do want this to be a very lively conversation, so please feel free to submit questions for the panelists. I've seen some questions come in through the chat. It actually helps if they come in through the separate Q&A button, which is, if I'm remembering this correctly on the panel, 2 buttons to the left of the chat buttons, or 1 button, I think. So if you go to the Q&A, that's going to help us kind of filter, sort, group questions, and kind of make sure to highlight the most frequently asked questions for discussion. And we'll answer as many as we can during this conversation and in follow-up materials via email, on YouTube, etc. Please definitely share your thoughts and tips on social media, just on how to work, how this conversation is going. Please do tag Code for America and or use the hashtag CFA Summit hashtag. And without further ado, this conversation is brought to us by our partner, Oracle. For more than 40 years, Oracle has helped public sector organizations around the world securely manage data, solve business challenges, and connect citizens and employees. Specifically, Oracle Cloud Services enable agencies to redefine innovation with enterprise-ready technology solutions. Integrated services that allow organizations to build, deploy, and manage their businesses seamlessly in the cloud or on premises. Oracle software and solutions help government agencies see data in new ways, discover insights, and prepare for rapid change and growth. A big thank you to our partner, Oracle. With that, I'd like to jump in and introduce our panelists. So as we do this, let's go one by one. And I'd invite Mary, Abby, and Bob to introduce themselves, show up on the video, and let's do name, role, and then the icebreaker question, which would be your favorite government agency, only rule being shouldn't be the one that you work at. And one thing perhaps that you hope the audience takes away from today's conversation. And over to you, Mary.
Hi, everybody. My name is Mary Hodge. I'm the Deputy Chief of Staff to the Mayor of Los Angeles, Mayor Eric Garcetti. My favorite agency that I do not work at is the zoo. That would be amazing to hang out with elephants and all the other stuff all day. And the one thing I hope everybody takes away from this is that government can do big things, that the bad rap that government and local government just is too slow and can't react fast is completely false, and especially with great partners that we can do really great things very quickly.
Thank you, Mary. It's great to have you with us. Over to Abby.
Thank you, Ryan. Hi, everyone. Abigail Marquez, Abby Marquez, and I'm the Assistant General Manager with the Housing and Community Investment Department. I have been with the city now for a little over 16 years, but outside of my own department, the department that I am connected to is the Department of Recreation and Parks. As a mom of 2 daughters who love being on the soccer field, I have to say that that is a department that I respect greatly for all the good work that they do across the city. Let's see. What I would add would be similar to what Mary shared. It is important to recognize that although we have, we work within a large bureaucracy, we can be very nimble, and there are a lot of employees who care deeply about the communities that we serve, and we want to be responsive to the needs of our communities. So that's what I would add.
Excellent. Thank you, Abby. Bob.
Thanks, Ryan. Yeah, I'm Bob Nevins, and I'm the Director of Health and Human Services Strategy here at Oracle Public Sector. Actually oversee state and local strategy as a whole. Really happy to be part of this. I guess the favorite agency of mine, and I worked in this agency in my early part of my career, is the Child Welfare Agency. They really do God's work. It's an underappreciated role if you're a social worker at a child welfare agency, yet the work they do is really fantastic and for the most vulnerable amongst our population. In terms of what I'd like folks to take away, I actually have two things, Ryan, if I don't break the rules here. One is I hope that we stimulate some ideas and some direction for folks that are on the webinar today through our conversations. I also hope that people realize that webinars can be fun. So those are the two takeaways that I would hope people have with this webinar.
Thank you, Bob. And as I mentioned earlier, my name is Ryan Coe. I'm the Chief of Staff at Code for America. Let's see here, my favorite government agency is the National Park Service and the Associated State Parks as well. And one thing that I hope everybody can take away from this conversation is just some really exciting tactical tips on how to make these public-private partnerships work across government and technology. Something I'm personally very passionate about, both in and out of work. Okay, and with that, let's see, I think before we jump into a presentation, we did think it would be kind of fun to quickly poll our audience, just to also help us as panelists and myself as the moderator to kind of get a sense for who we have participating today. So I'm going to release 3 poll questions in just a second. They're really quick kind of multiple choice questions. The first is, what part of our ecosystem do you represent? Whether that's public sector or government or nonprofit or academia or private sector vendor or something else. The second question is, what best describes the level of government you work with? That could be federal, state, or local. That's counties, cities, etc. And then the third is, what geographic region do you represent? And I will just note that I'm using the US Census Bureau regions here, although the federal government has lots and lots and lots of different ways of classifying regions. So if you're not sure what region you're in, just please take your best guess and we'll go for that. It looks like we've got a good mix across federal, state, and local, and a really good, really even split across public servants, nonprofit academia, and private sector and vendor. And in terms of geographical representation, it looks like we're pretty weighted toward the West Coast, with good representation from the Northeast, Midwest, and South as well. Let's see, this poll's been open for about a minute now, so I'll give it another 10 or 15 seconds and close, show results and move on. Just note and comment that it's always obviously fun to have this in person, and I do wish I were in person with our amazing panelists here as well as our audience, because then we could, do this show of hands, standing up, sitting down, that kind of thing. And to Bob's point, this is virtual, but we will make sure this webinar is engaging and make sure to have our audience get the takeaways that they're looking for. Excellent. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Mary and Abby for a quick presentation on the City of Los Angeles Angelino card.
Wonderful. Thank you, Ryan. I'm going to get us started. But before I do that, I just want to say that we appreciate very much to have been invited to this presentation, and we're excited to share the work that we did in partnership with Oracle and many other partners to launch the Angelino card program. And I also want to just acknowledge my colleague who you'll hear from later, Mary Hodge, who was instrumental along with her team in helping with both the design and the implementation of this program. I mentioned that I've been working for the city of Los Angeles for a little over 16 years now, and I've never had the honor of to have worked on the implementation of a program that created such a profound impact in the lives of so many families that were served and benefited from this program. Obviously, we are in unprecedented times, and no one ever imagined that we would be in a pandemic, and that we would need to really stand up a program that would provide direct cash assistance to households who are severely impacted by COVID-19. So I'll go on to the next slide. I'll talk a little bit about the vision of the Angelino card, that we really have to give credit to Mayor Eric Garcetti. This was his vision, and he activated both his city departments and his staff and every network that he can tap to stand up a program that would provide direct financial assistance to individuals and families in our city who are facing extreme financial hardship prior to the pandemic, and because of the pandemic were in deeper financial distress. And so that is what we did, and we worked very closely with the Mayor's Fund for Los Angeles. The mayor's wife, the First Lady of Los Angeles, was very much involved in the design as well, and created a program, again, that was able to leverage our infrastructure of community partners who were had boots on the ground, who were on the front line working with families who directly benefited from this program. Next slide. We were really trying to focus on very simple criteria. We didn't want to create any additional challenges or hurdles for individuals who would benefit from this, from accessing the benefit. So we again looked at households who were already living in poverty prior to COVID-19 and who were experiencing deeper financial stress. We looked at a variety of different essential workers in our city and our economy. So we looked at hourly workers, people who were working at restaurants, seasonal workers, and we also looked at our workers who were relying heavily on the cash economy. So we didn't want to exclude anyone from being able to benefit from this program. So we made it accessible to day laborers and street vendors, and also individuals who were waiting on their unemployment insurance benefits to kick in. So we were, again, we're trying to be very flexible to be able to cast a wide net on the number of individuals who in the end benefited from the program. Next slide. Our response, again, I believe it's still factual today. We were the first city to stand up such a program, and to this day have been able to offer the largest emergency cash assistance program in the country. And we've been fortunate to be able to advise and provide some of our feedback to other cities across the country. But the response was nothing short of just extremely overwhelming in a great way, and in a great way that people were in need of this program, but also in a way that really just showcased the need that was out there, not just in our city, but across the country. When we created an online portal, and we were also supporting individuals who needed assistance with over the phone with their application. But in a period of 3 short days, we received over 450,000 applications, both online and over the telephone. And we didn't do a lot of social media. Again, the mayor has been remarkable in providing daily updates through his media briefings, and we used his daily briefing to announce the Angelino card program, and then it went viral. It was picked up by every media outlet across the city, across the state. We received interest from individuals across the state of California, across the country, certainly from individuals outside of our city. Our county represents 88 cities, so we had interest from across the county of LA. We then looked at the individuals who qualified. So we did limit the program to cities, individuals who lived in the city of Los Angeles, and we pre-qualified a list of approximately 164,000 applicants who were then eligible for the program. Then we went further and looked at duplicate entries or individuals who were in the same household. We needed to narrow down the pool of applicants, and we ended up with a list of 120 eligible applicants that were, again, potentially eligible for the program. At the time when the mayor announced the creation of the Angelino Card program, he had secured a pretty significant amount of private funding. I believe at that time it was between 5, and we were very hopeful and optimistic that we would get to $10 million that we would be able to issue to households who applied. And already having a list of 120,000 eligible applicants was, a much larger list than the demand was much larger. And again, we were able to provide multiple access points for people to apply online and over the telephone. And through a relationship that Mary was able to bring in, we also had a call center that we contracted with that at one point activated between 70 and 75 operators to be able to provide over the phone assistance to individuals interested in applying for the program. Next slide. So we talked a little bit about the criteria that we established for the program. Again, we were focusing on individuals who were laid off because of the pandemic. And we didn't exclude anyone who qualified for unemployment insurance, but we did want to provide an immediate response. We know that a lot of government systems were standing up programs and there were some delays and backlogs. So we wanted to provide some direct cash support. And we were also looking at individuals who had experienced severe reduction of hours or were furloughed. So one thing that is important to note is that we didn't ask anything related to immigration status. That was just not even a question. So we were very clear that we didn't want to preclude anyone who may or may not have been undocumented or were, we didn't ask that question. We wanted to make the program universal and accessible to anyone in the city who met the criteria. Next slide. Again, we talked about this. We looked at City of LA residents. What we did is I talked a little bit about our network. We have a network of family source centers that we activated. And these are centers that are supported by the Housing and Community Investment Department. They are community partners that by design are already situated in the areas of the city with the highest concentrations of poverty. And this is what they do. They serve low-income households. They connect them to employment opportunities. They provide case management services. So we activated our network of nonprofit partners to assist with the verification process to determine who was in fact eligible. We did ask individuals who were selected to receive the Angelino card to schedule an appointment. We scheduled appointments for them at one of our 16 nonprofit partner agencies, and they were asked to bring in documentation to verify that they were in fact City of LA residents. They were asked to bring in either a driver's license or a utility bill that established city residency. We asked for them to bring copies of their 2018 or 29 tax return to look at their wages to determine if they met the criteria based on the poverty household size or their W-2 or paycheck stub. And then we also asked for either the name of their employer who had reduced their hours. We looked at a layoff letter or if they were waiting for an insurance benefit. So those types of documentation is what we collected to be able to determine eligibility. But I just really want to acknowledge the role of our nonprofit partners who helped us with their experience in serving Angelinos who, for a variety of different reasons, are seeking services from the city. So I'll turn it over. Next slide is I'm going to turn it over to Mary to walk us through the remainder of the presentation.
Great, thank you, Abby. Yeah, without Abby, this whole program would not have been able to happen because of the awesome network that HSID has with all of our nonprofits. And basically, Abby and her team built this whole plan from the beginning when the mayor decided to, he wanted to be able to give direct cash assistance. So from all of the money that he was able to raise through the mayor's fund, we were able to give out Angelino cards ranging in the amount of $700 to about $1,500 per household. And that was based on how many people lived in their household, and also if they had previously received some other financial assistance that we were able to give out. Next slide. So as you saw from Abby, you know, the need and the applications were great. The fact that we had 450,000 applications, I think we all pretty quickly realized we needed to build something to be able to handle all of these applicants. It wasn't going to just be something that we could all handle off of Google spreadsheets or even in some kind of internal database. So that's when we reached out to Oracle. We reached out to a couple other partners I'll go through at the end of my slides to kind of build this network as what we put together to be able to have the Angelino card process. So this was the actual flow chart. And I don't know if you can scroll down just a little bit because it's cutting off a little bit. But this is the flow chart of how it all works. People received an email. So once we got through the application process and we said that you were going to be one of the people that we had selected, and we did a random selection. So once they were selected through the Oracle system, we were able to send them an email, and they were able to walk through a portal, which helped them walk through in 3 different steps, all of the different forms that they were going to have to be able to bring with them. So we did that very intentionally because we didn't want folks to show up to their appointment and not know what they were supposed to bring, since some of these things are things they really need to go and find. So once they walked through the portal, which Oracle built, then they were able to actually select their own appointment themselves, what day, what location in the city of Los Angeles. LA is really big, so to be able to have to force people to go across town was not something we wanted to have them do. So they were able to select from a network of over 20 different nonprofit sites for them to be able to select their own appointment. So next, when they showed up, the site coordinators used Oracle to print a daily schedule and help them figure out what the day was going to look like with how many appointments and how many people they were going to be seeing. Then when an applicant showed up, greeters verified who they were using the daily schedule from Oracle. And if they had all of their documents, they sent them to an eligibility station for them to be able to work with one of the nonprofit staffers on verifying their documents. And then after that, they were at the verification system, step 4. They looked through their documents, they talked with them, they used the Oracle system to actually log in what they brought, how they were eligible, so we could capture all of that information. And if they were eligible, they were then sent to another station, which is step 5, which was for them to actually receive the Angelino card. And at the Angelino card station, the applicant signed a document to acknowledge they were going to receive the card. They gave us a little bit more information about their how to get in touch with them. We entered in the actual card. On the card, there were unique identifiers that we put into Oracle so that we could capture what person goes to what card. And then step 6, the applicant left with the Angelino card. And step 7, every night, our awesome team stayed up for several hours verifying, not only taking all of the, from all the FFCs, there are over 20 of them, taking all of that information, pulling the people who were eligible, pulling their card information, sending that into our card vendor so that those cards could get activated and money being put on them. And at the same time, also deduping and just making sure that, you know, all of the nonprofit organizations were filling things incorrectly, finding any things that were anomalies and trying to fix them so that we weren't going to deal with hundreds of anomalies at the end. We wanted to deal with them daily. So we had a really great team who, because of the Oracle system, we were able to download and run reports nightly that helped us be able to not have a whole backlog at the end. And then the last step was that we, like I said, step 8 is we loaded the Angelino card, and it was activated within 24 hours. And we told the applicants when we handed it to them that this would be activated within 24 hours. So they needed to wait. And then they were on their merry way being able to use the card. So next slide. So overall, in 8 weeks from when we started this, I would say we started applications about the beginning of April. We had the application process. We reached out to Oracle. We built the system within 2 weeks, which was crazy, but it was awesome due to everybody's support and help. And then we implemented, and that went all the way through the end of June. So from about April to June 30th is when this all happened. We distributed 37,841 cards. We served about 120,000 people, and we gave out over 36 million. I actually think this is 37 million now, just because we had to, in the middle of all this, account for COVID and people who could not show up to the nonprofits to verify their documents. So we ended up towards the end coming up with our own way of verifying over the phone and doing FaceTime or WhatsApp or Zoom so that we could verify documents over the phone. So we got ourselves to the 37 million mark. Next slide. And I will point out from the last slide, Abby said the mayor had initially raised between $5 and $10 million, and we were all super excited just to even be able to give that out. But what happened as we were giving out the money, the mayor was announcing it nightly on his nightly briefings, telling people, we gave out another million, we gave out this, like, it's great, we're moving so fast, which was so amazing for not only our nonprofit partners to have that validation, but it ended up having more people started giving more money to the mayor's fund because they were seeing that, you know, if they were putting their money into the mayor's fund, into the COVID-19 fund, it was going directly out to real people right away. So that was really great. And that basically ballooned from 10 million to getting about $37 million from small donors, also big donors. So we would have big donors like the head of SNAP giving us several $1,000,000 to people just going on themselves and giving us 50, 100, $25 because they knew that it was directly going to somebody right away and that we were not going to just hold on to this money. It was getting out to people. These are just our demographics just so we can show like who we reached. About 63% of the folks that got the card were female. Next slide. And then we also do other genders as well. Going along with Los Angeles's makeup, about 43% of those who received the card were Hispanic, Latino, 27% were white, 15% were Black, and so on. So we were pretty proud of the way that this kind of went across all different races. And then next slide. And then income level. This was really important to us to make sure that, people who really needed the card got the card, and the results speak for themselves that the highest amount of folks who got the card, 59% of them were folks who had a 0 to 12,490 income level, which was fantastic. So we were really happy to see that, what we had planned to do and our outreach really did result. And the verification of documents really did result in the folks who needed the card getting it the most. And then next slide. And these are all our partnerships. And this came together, honestly, within the span of like a weekend and a couple of days when we realized, we needed more help to get this done and it needed more technology. When Abby's team put this together and this whole idea, it was amazing. They had the infrastructure of the nonprofits, the infrastructure of who to reach out to. They had already done the application. Like this thing was already flying. We were calling this, the plane was already in the air. We were like, okay, we need to build more pieces to it. So when we realized that we had 450,000 people that we needed to know who you were at any given place and what stage you were in, again, like I said, we couldn't just use spreadsheets. So we, Accelerator for America is another group that the mayor is in charge of. Along with the Mayor's Fund, got us all in touch, put us all together basically with Oracle, with MasterCard, with prepaid technologies. Stone's Phones is a vendor that did all of the calls because not everybody could just get an email. And then Time Trade was a really important piece to this, which allowed us to be able to let people make their own scheduling across, 150,000 people all scheduling at the same time is not something we can just have a person doing over the phone with them. We really needed live timed for everybody to be able to schedule themselves. So this great group of partnerships that literally came together over weekends and contracts late night and trying to push things through the best we could was how we were able to do this. And that's the Angelino card.
Thank you, Abby and Mary, for sharing all of that. It's just incredibly illuminating to hear the public servant's kind of view from the city, as well as we'll hear a little bit from Bob in a second, as well. Before going there, though, I just wanted to make a quick comment, which is, I thought it was just incredibly interesting. So Code for America has these principles, right? Building equitable systems, putting people first, empowering public servants for action, informing with evidence, and kind of improving continuously. And just the speed of the execution and the collaboration between the different partners, as well as all the considerations of making sure that, residents didn't have to drive across town, that it was really easy for them. And also, one of the things that I wanted to highlight that the Oracle system did was actually make it easy for the public servants working in the city government to administer this in an easier way than Google Sheets. So just wanted to hold up this example as something that I think really frankly hits many of Code for America's principles as well. Before going to Bob, there's a couple of things that were coming up for me. You've probably seen lots of technology projects in human services and social services over the years. What was really the special sauce for this one that made it so successful? Maybe this is for Abby or Mary.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Ryan. I was also trying to answer one of the questions in the chat, but I appreciate the question, and I appreciate the comment about the principles, and I do think that it's directly aligned with the principles. And what I would add is that, and what I should have also added in my introduction, is that this is an example of a public-private partnership that came to life because there were so many partners that were willing to come to the table to work with government to address a huge challenge that we all were sort of seeing on the ground, we're hearing about, when we had an opportunity to directly respond to. So this was an example of, there was the public will, and there was a will of the mayor, and we have an incredible leader in our city who was quickly able to activate a wide network of different partners to help us address this challenge. And so to me, that is an example of, when we work effectively across the table with the private sector, with other thought partners, we can do great things. And this is an example of that.
And I would just add, it was also a great example of this was built from the ground up, not from us at the top down. So the nonprofits and Abby's team really came up with how they were going to process people first. It was all on paper and Google Sheets, and it was great. And they built in, what was the fastest way for them to process people when they came in? What was the safest way for them to process people? What questions did they need to ask? What did we actually need to fill out versus like a whole bunch of other nonsense we didn't need to ask? And because they had built all that on paper first, when we went to Oracle, we already had what we wanted the database to look like. And it took a little bit, Oracle and us talking of, we didn't want this very wonky database that was like, had to go into many different things to pull down this menu and click this. We wanted the database to look like the one sheet of paper that the process person was using. And they were great. They took the process form and they made the database look like the process form. So when we went back to the nonprofits, to the staffers that were the ones doing this process in the first place, the database looked exactly like the paper they were already using. So this made the training, it took a day to train all of them instead of like 3 weeks on how to use a brand new technology, which definitely could be very daunting. And that was, I think, a lot to our team for really insisting that we wanted something that was super easy and natural to use, and Oracle's flexibility in being able to build something that looked like something that we were already using.
Thank you both. And just keeping an eye on time, let's move over to Bob, and then we'll do some more Q&A after as well.
Sure. Do you want to go on to our slides, Ryan? Terrific. Well, there's really not much more I can say about the Mayor's Fund project that Mary and Abby haven't already gone over. It was really the perfect marriage of really dedicated, driven, innovative leaders and staff with the technology that can make this work. And it was a platform that we used in a number of different places and configure so that it could meet the needs that OA had. If we go on to the next slide, Ryan, the interesting thing with the way that we operate is that we have solutions, software solutions that aren't necessarily targeted to a particular function. So in this example, we used the very same technology platform in the Ohio Environmental Protection Agency that we used for the Mayor's Fund in LA. Yet it was a very different business function. In this case, it was to enable small and medium-sized businesses to navigate the permit process for how to get businesses up and running or how to keep them running. And previously, this was a really frustrating process, very labor intensive, but we were able to configure the same kind of technology platform as what we had in LA to make it a much easier process. Similarly, if you go to the next slide, we did this in a number of different states as it relates to substance use disorder. And I happen to be very involved in the very first one we did in Massachusetts, where there always had been a telephone helpline for folks or families that were suffering as a result of substance use disorder. But at the time, the governor really wanted us to kind of step things up and make it a much easier process for people to find help. And so we worked with the state of Massachusetts and improved their portal so that it really worked much better, and individuals could come in, or family members or caseworkers. They could answer a number of questions about the particular individual who was suffering. How much, where do they live? How far are they willing to travel? What was their health insurance? What sort of substance are they using? How long? And as a result of gathering all that information, we could tailor the resources that they should be accessing in order to help with their issue, and maybe the the treatment centers that are best for them given their particular circumstances, give them a better chance of recovering. And it was so successful that we actually replicated it in Illinois and most recently in Vermont. Really the same technology platform, little bit different configuration for each state, but not radical. And quite frankly, this before the pandemic, substance use disorder was, and in particular opioids, was the #1 policy objective on almost every governor's plate. So it really was something that was successful for us. And we go on to the next slide here, Ryan. The last thing I wanted to talk about briefly is the COVID-19 prevention solution that we've put in place, working with the National Institutes of Health. And really what this does is it enables individuals to come in and sign up to be a phase 3 volunteer for a vaccine study. And just before coming on to this webinar, I actually did this and went through the series of questions and signed up myself. And it was really easy. And, at the end of the process, it brought up a YouTube that had a number of different individuals from the National Institutes of Health and this COVID-19 protection network come up and thank you for signing up, really explain what the next process is or what you might be hearing over the next several weeks. And I really felt good about the whole process. So those are a few examples of what we're able to do with our technology and really focusing in on the major problems of the day or challenges of the day in the public sector. Oh, one more slide, actually, just so I don't forget. Here's a few links that we have that folks can go on and check out. The first is our free Oracle Cloud tier, where actually you can go in and see how this all works, see what it's like to be on the Oracle Cloud. Folks can also register for training. We have a link to our public sector specific part of the website. And lastly, in collaboration with eRepublic and Government Technology, we have a Leading in Crisis website, which is really all about solutions that are coming about as a result of the pandemic. So a very good resource for folks to go in and check out. So thanks, Ryan, appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you, Bob, for sharing. Just really quickly, I think the first question that's come in via the Q&A here is one that, Mary, you mentioned you were going to answer live. The question is, how did you ensure you're reaching everybody with the distribution of these funds, especially the most vulnerable small businesses?
Yeah, it's a great question. So first, the Angelino card was not for businesses. It was for individuals. But how we made sure we reached everybody was people who were selected for the card, they received at least 10 different phone calls from the phone vendor that we partnered with. They received, I would say, up to about 5 to 6 different emails constantly reminding them to be able to go to the next step. So, and we kept our process open. We had different cohorts every time when we kept adding new people from the wait list. But if you were a cohort 1 who we told you could get the card in April, if you all of a sudden popped up in June, we definitely let you keep going through the system and paid the card out to you, because we wanted to make sure that, the group of folks that we're dealing with are folks who aren't used or are used to, don't want to answer the phone to a number that they're not used to. Emails coming into them from a government agency isn't necessarily, seen positively. So we learned very early on, just sending one phone call to them or one email was not going to cut it. We needed to give them all the benefit of the doubt and just constantly push to see how many people we could transition over to getting the card.
Thanks. And maybe we'll just open it up. And this is a question for all of the panelists. I think what amazes me about this project is just how quickly the public and private partnership was set up and executed. And I'm just curious, you're all incredibly experienced and have seen different technology projects across government, human services, health services, social services, and more. I think this audience is probably especially interested in what made this work so well, so quickly in the midst of a crisis.
I think we talked about it a little, Ryan, but it definitely is due to the infrastructure that we have in place. And I think the city of Los Angeles is unique in the way that we fund our network of service providers. So we have already an infrastructure of organizations that are serving the exact population that we were targeting through this program. And we also have a data system that we do already have in place that is collecting a variety of different demographic information. We're very focused on a lot of different metrics, and we're serving, again, the population that although it was different, it was not the population that they were currently serving, but it was the population that we were targeting. And then the other piece is that, again, what we talked about, we were able to really leverage different sets of partners to come to the table to help us with this program. But I just really want to emphasize the value and the relationship that we have with our service providers. And I appreciate Mary giving them a shout out or highlighting them, because it was really a unique approach. And when we've talked to other cities, that seems to be part of the initial sort of roadblock, is really activate. Who do you have that has their boots on the ground, that is able to quickly provide this direct cash assistance to eligible applicants? And so we really did rely on them, and we were able to provide them with all of the protective measures that they needed. And we are in a pandemic, so it's not where we can have crowds of people gathering at a community center. So we had to be very intentional about how we designed the program to protect both the recipients of the card, but also our service providers.
But I'd also add, contracts in a city government are very hard to get signed very quickly. And I would say that this is unique because COVID happened, and a lot of different rules that usually apply in city governments are not out the window, but are definitely laxed a little bit, which makes it a lot easier to push contracts through, like the one we needed with Oracle or the other partners. The other thing I would say is that we raised the money through a nonprofit. So that was also a very big thing that helped us move much faster. So all of the funds were raised through the mayor's fund, which is the nonprofit that the mayor has that's on the side, and it was great. So the funds were going into the mayor's fund. They were able to raise all of that money and do all of that instead of it needing to come into the city and figure out a place for it to go, which would have definitely slowed things down on how just regular city government works.
Yeah, I'd like to just echo what Mary said about the urgency that was brought about by the pandemic. And maybe a silver lining that comes out of this is that the unusually cumbersome bureaucratic roadblocks that sometimes get in the way. We can really take a look at those and decide how how to get rid of them, how to make procurements run much more smoothly. Because at the end of the day, it's about getting to results and getting to results that help the people we're trying to serve.
Question that just came through Zoom was, what was your greatest challenge with the project? And what would you do differently next time? And if I may also spin this a little bit, which is, what are the learnings that you take moving forward, kind of to what Bob just said, of this project, and how do you bring it to the rest of your work?
I'll go first on that one. The biggest thing I would take away from is password reset. Everybody has problems with password reset, no matter who you are, and letting people reset their password because they're going to do it a million times is a big thing. You should just always incorporate into any kind of technology, anything, because otherwise it just results in a million calls and having to do it for them, and it's just a lot. I myself lose my passwords a million times, so that was a big positive thing I've learned that I will make sure is happening on every single project happening forward. Some of the things I do differently, and just things we learned. I mean, COVID is a real problem, and our nonprofits were really lucky at the beginning when people were coming in that we weren't having full-scale shutdowns of the locations because of COVID. But towards the end, as COVID was getting worse, we were having people come in because the need is there. They needed the money. No matter how many times you said, please don't come in if you have symptoms, they would still come in, which would result in needing to shut down a location if they were exposed. So we didn't really have the time at the moment, but incorporating being able to upload documents, which we're doing on another program right now, which is working extremely well. I think at first we thought that wasn't going to be something people were going to be able to do naively, but another program we're doing right now with rental assistance, that's definitely working and it's great. Just trying to figure out other ways for people to be able to do this from the office and not have to come in and verify their documents. The verifying documents is really important so we can make sure that we're giving funds out to people who need funds, but figuring out other ways, whether it's uploading documents or doing, I know Oracle has talked to us about the way that they can do a live chat inside Oracle and building it into the phone bank inside the database, stuff like that. If we would have had more time, I think we would have done from the beginning, but it's great to know that those tools exist. And it's something we would do moving forward.
It's very helpful. And perhaps, oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to add that I think the biggest challenge was just trying to respond to such an unprecedented need. I think that this pandemic provided a glaring just example of the challenges that families, again, many of them were facing prior and have fallen into deeper economic distress. And our service providers were challenged, particularly challenged with, I think, on a day where we had maximum appointments scheduled, they were seeing anywhere from 150 to 200 people per day per site across 20 sites. And we had to quickly shift our priority to respond and support applicants in issuing them the Angelino card. But we also had a host of other families who were in need of other types of services. So trying to really support our nonprofit partners in first, as Mary mentioned, keeping them safe and free from COVID, which we started to see a lot of cases of COVID come up towards the end, but also trying to figure out how to continue to provide services to multiple households who were facing multiple challenges. So Angelino card really allowed for us. So I'll just give you an example. In our normal system, in our normal cycle, we serve about 40,000 people through our family source system. Under the Angelino card program, we served close to 60,000 if you consider those that came in who weren't eligible for the card for a variety of different reasons. That's just in a short window of 8 weeks. We saw the volume of people that we see in a year. So just the demand that was placed on our service providers, I think, was a challenge. But I also, the learning from that is that they're resilient and they really want to be able to support and respond. So that was incredibly just, it was wonderful to see that they were, that they really are partners to the city. And I think the respect is mutual for us.
Maybe this next question is I'm going to go to Bob. Bob, you've actually also been a public servant in a past life as well, and you've seen government technology systems, large and small, simple and complex. What, in your experience tends to work well in this collaboration? And what advice would you give our audience now that you've seen both sides of this from both public servant and vendor on how to work with each other?
Yeah, so you're right, Ryan. So I spent 25 years working in public sector roles, and it was always at the intersection of kind of technology and government. And I always used to try to think of things from the customer perspective. How would they want to interact with government? Do they really care? For instance, the early websites for governments were very agency centric. And so that made sense to the government, but it didn't necessarily make sense to the citizen or businesses that were trying to interact with government. So we changed a lot of that in one of my roles. And again, I always try to think about it from the standpoint of the citizen or myself. How would I want to navigate this process? What would be easy for me? And what barriers are in the way for making it easy that we can just get rid of because they don't make sense. So, it's simple advice, but think about it from a citizen perspective and how you would like to navigate a particular process.
Yeah, and as we move forward, one thing that you mentioned earlier is you saw kind of the shifting mindsets as we talk about procurement and contracting and remote work, as you mentioned in a blog post on the Code for America site as well. What are the key trends you see moving forward kind of in this market as you talk to lots of public servants and sort of, what are they asking for and what are they excited to work with Oracle on?
I'm sorry, Ryan. I was replying to the question.
Oh, you were replying to something on the chat. Sorry. I was just asking, like, as you kind of sort of see across the government landscape, you've mentioned in our blog post on the Code for America website, for example, the shift to remote. You mentioned earlier in this conversation, for example, changing perceptions around procurement and moving faster, et cetera. So I'm just curious, like, what trends you see moving forward.
Yeah, I think certainly, we talk about cloud innovation. Unfortunately, what's going to happen over the next couple of years is that the operating budget of cities and towns and states is probably going to go down. And so they're going to have to look for ways to serve the same number of people and businesses with fewer resources. And, cloud technology in all of its forms can accommodate that. I think there's going to be less face-to-face interaction as a result of the pandemic. So there's going to be more perhaps use of video, easier ways for people to interface with government. I think because of the enormous amounts of data that are now available, I think government programs are going to be much more data-driven than they have been in the past. And, that's going to enable us to be more efficient, design programs around what the data is telling us. And, that goes along with making use of things like artificial intelligence and machine learning that actually interact with those mounds of data that have become available. So those are just a few of the things that I think we'll see change over the next years.
And I'm curious, actually, both for Abby and Mary, what about from your perspective as you continue to move forward and, meet needs of the people you serve and the government you're working in, and, as you move from crisis response to stability and recovery as we look forward. Any trends, any thoughts on how to better work with vendors and in technology moving forward?
Mary, do you want to?
I'm thinking on this. I think there's just a lot more technology that we don't even know about and how it actually can work for us. So just like having those discussions and meeting with more and more people, different groups, different different vendors and just hearing all they can do and seeing the presentations. Like when we were talking about how we were kind of, lack of a better word, jankily putting together FaceTime so I could show your stuff on your screen, Oracle was like, we have live experience, and they walked us through live experience, and we're like, oh, this is really cool. So I just think there's a lot of stuff that we don't necessarily know is available. So just taking the time to kind of really go through and hear all the stuff that's out there and how we could use it, I think is something that we'll be looking forward to do in the future, especially when we're not in this crisis mode of just trying to hurry up and get stuff done. It would be great to actually get to tinker with stuff and hear about all the cool stuff that's out there, which is great. That's why Code for America is cool, because we can see what other people are doing and share this stuff so we can kind of learn from other cities and what other people are using.
Yeah, I think the piece that I will add, and I know that our worlds are changing and we are adapting to this new reality, our new normal, and it will absolutely change the way that government operates, and it's already changed, vastly in the last couple of months. The mayor just issued an executive order around contactless services, city services, and Mary and I have been in a lot of conversations with a number of departments that are interested in replicating to some scale the work that we did with Angelino card, and looking at, I think what's really great about the Angelino card was the prepaid card feature that allows for the population that we have in our city that is unbanked or underbanked to have access to a way to make payments, or to have a relationship with some type of financial institution, or be able to make these cash transfers in a way that they wouldn't be able to without this type of product. And so for that, we also are very appreciative of relationship with not just Oracle, but with MasterCard and prepaid, which allowed a whole population within our economy to be able to access these types of services. And so we're looking at ways to enhance that, to be able to make this type of service available for folks to be able to pay their utility bills on a regular basis without having to go in person to do that. So I think that it's creating a whole host of other opportunities for us locally that we're very excited about.
Thank you. Well, just keeping an eye on time, we're at the top of the hour. So I just really wanted to thank Abby and Mary and Bob and our sponsor Oracle for setting this up and allowing us to have this amazing case example of government technology and just really serving people in, when it's needed the most. Just in closing, something I'd like to offer up is Code for America's slogan. When we wrote this like 10 years ago, it really felt like the conversation around government and technology was really starting. So we kind of, in kind of typical nonprofit fashion, decided to take a bit of a controversial tone with "No one is coming, it's up to us." And over the past 10 years, as we've worked, we've realized that, all the attendees on the call, all the public servants, all the governments and vendors who are thinking through this, it really does feel like everyone is showing up to this conversation. So thank you for that. And just one last slide here. Just as always, you can find Code for America online. Our blog is at codeforamerica.org/news. We operate under the, we're just really grateful for any donations that you can provide at /donate. And please do follow us at Code for America as well. And with that, I think that's all the time we have. So thank you again to Abby and Mary from the city of LA, and Bob from Oracle. And thank you to our amazing audience for attending another one of our Code for America Virtual Summit series discussions.
Thank you. Thank you, Ryan. Thank you, Bob.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Ryan.
Mary. Thanks, everyone.